I never planned to hide something so big from the people I loved. But sometimes life places you in a moment where you feel very small, very alone, and very unsure of what the next breath should be. And that was me, standing in the quiet of my small room, holding a thin white test in my hand. It felt like the whole world disappeared into silence. I did not cry at first. I just stood there. And for a long moment, I could not even move. It's strange how one little line on one little piece of plastic can change the shape of your entire life. It was like time paused, watching me, waiting for me to finally accept what I was seeing. I remember whispering to myself, "This cannot be happening. Not now." My voice sounded so far away, like someone else was speaking. But it was happening. And deep inside, I knew exactly who the Father was, and I knew exactly why I could not tell anyone. Not my family, not my friends, not even him. The fear was heavy. Not the loud, wild kind of fear, but the quiet kind. The kind that sits on your chest and follows you everywhere. I kept thinking about my mother's face if she found out. I imagined my father's silence, the disappointment, the questions, the shame. I kept imagining the moment he, the only person who had the right to know, would look at me and see the truth. I didn't want him to look at me with pity. I didn't want him to feel trapped. I didn't want him to think I had done this on purpose. So I made a decision that I now realize changed everything. I decided to hide my pregnancy. I told no one. I folded the truth deep inside me like a fragile secret. Every day I woke up pretending everything was normal, pretending my life wasn't changing in a way I could barely understand. But secrets have a way of finding their own path back to the surface, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, and for me, it happened one quiet evening. A knock at the door. Slow. Familiar. Unexpected. When I opened it, he was standing there. And that was the moment everything I had tried to hide began to unravel. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, and where secrets were supposed to be rare. Our street was lined with small houses, old trees, and narrow paths where children played until sunset. My family lived in a soft, steady rhythm. Nothing dramatic ever happened. Nothing that made the world stop. I used to think my life was simple. Not perfect, but safe. My mother woke up early every morning and made tea that filled the entire house with its warm scent. My father read the newspaper at the same spot on the sofa every day with the same tired smile. And I just moved through my days quietly, trying not to disturb the balance of our home. My mother always said, "Peace is the most precious thing, my dear. Don't lose it." So I tried my best to always appear calm, even when life didn't feel calm inside. I was studying at the time, balancing classes, assignments, and a part-time job. My life felt busy, but in a normal way. I had friends, but not the kind who knew everything about me. I kept most things to myself. It was easier that way. Easier to manage. Easier to control. And then I met him. His name doesn't matter now because this story isn't really about him. It's about me and the choices I made. But he was part of the beginning. And maybe that's all that matters. He wasn't someone I expected to become close to. He walked into my life quietly, like a soft breeze on a warm day. Gentle, unnoticed at first. We met in a small bookstore near campus. I was looking for a book I needed for class, and he was standing in the same aisle. He smiled first. I remember thinking it was a warm smile. Not loud, not confident, just warm. We talked for a few minutes. It was nothing special, or at least that's what I thought at the time. But the next day he came back. And the next. And slowly, somehow we started spending more time together. It wasn't a dramatic love story. There were no fireworks or big sudden moments. It was quiet, soft, the kind of connection that grows without you realizing it. He made me feel seen, not in a grand way, but in a gentle way. He asked about my day, my dreams, my fears. No one had asked me about my fears before, not like he did. He didn't rush my answers, he didn't judge them, he just listened. I didn't tell him everything. I never do. But I told him enough for him to feel close. And he shared things too. His childhood, his worries, the pressure he carried from his family. We weren't perfect, but we were comfortable. I didn't know then how temporary everything would be. Our moments together were small. Coffee after class, walking side by side in silence, laughing about ordinary things. Sometimes we would sit on a park bench and say nothing at all, just watching the world move around us. Looking back now, I can see the signs of things I ignored. Little gaps, little uncertainties. Moments when I felt him pulling away, even when he was right beside me. But at the time, I held on to the good parts. I held on to the warmth. And then there was one evening, simple, quiet, ordinary, that changed everything. It wasn't planned, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even emotional. It just happened. Two people feeling close, sharing a moment they didn't fully understand yet. I didn't think much about it after. Life moved on, and so did we. But slowly, something between us began to shift. He became distant. Not in a harsh or cold way, just a step further than before. His messages became shorter, his presence quieter. And even when I asked if everything was okay, he would smile and say, "Yeah, just busy. Don't worry." So I tried not to worry, but inside, my heart felt heavier day by day. A few weeks later, he said he needed some time. No fight, no anger, just a soft sentence that felt like a door closing slowly. I told him I understood, and part of me did. Relationships change. People grow apart. Life moves in different directions. I didn't chase him. I didn't cry in front of him. I didn't ask for explanations. I just let him go quietly, like everything else I had always let slip away in my life. But then came the morning when everything changed. The morning I stood in that bathroom, holding a test with trembling hands. The morning when I realized I was pregnant. I sat on the floor for a long time. The tiles felt cold under me, and the room felt too small. I kept thinking, what do I do now? Who do I tell? How do I explain this? But every answer led to more fear. My mother had always held high expectations for me. She believed in me. She trusted me. And I felt like I had broken that trust without even meaning to. My father was quiet but strict. He never raised his voice, but his silence always spoke louder than any words. I could already picture that silence wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. And him, the person who should have known most of all, I imagined his face, surprised, scared, confused, maybe even regretful. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to be the reason someone felt trapped. So I made a choice that felt like protecting everyone. Hiding the truth seemed easier than breaking their hearts, easier than breaking my own. Every day after that was a quiet struggle. I woke up pretending I was the same person as before. I smiled when I needed to. I studied. I worked. I acted like nothing had changed. But inside, everything was changing. My body was changing. My emotions were shifting. My fears were growing. I started walking more slowly, eating carefully, resting whenever I could, all in silence. No one noticed. Or maybe they noticed small things but didn't ask. Life around me continued like a river flowing past someone standing still. There were nights when I held my stomach gently, whispering apologies to a tiny life that didn't ask for any of this. I didn't know what the future would look like. I just knew I had to keep moving, one small step at a time. And for weeks it worked. My secret stayed safe. Until the day everything shifted again. A quiet evening, a soft knock at the door. A voice I hadn't heard in so long. When I opened the door that evening, I felt my breath stop halfway in my chest. There he was, standing on the small step outside my home, with a look I couldn't read. Not angry, not sad, just searching, as if he was trying to find the right words even before saying hello. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway behind me felt too quiet, too small, too bright, and the world outside looked dim, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Finally, he said softly, "Can we talk?" His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't sharp. It was gentle, almost tired. And maybe that should have made me feel safe, but instead it made my heart tighten. I stepped back to let him in. He walked slowly, looking around as if everything in the room held memories he had forgotten. We sat across from each other with a small wooden table between us. My hands were trembling, so I kept them under the table where he wouldn't see. He leaned forward and said, "I'm sorry I disappeared for a while." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure how I felt. He continued, "I was dealing with a lot, family stuff, pressure, and I didn't know how to talk about it." His voice was soft, struggling. I believed him, or at least I believed that he believed what he was saying, but inside me, something felt fragile. Like the words he spoke were touching parts of me that were already cracked. I whispered, "It's okay," and he looked at me closely, almost too closely. I shifted in my chair, pressing my arm against my stomach without thinking. A small movement, but one he noticed. He asked, "Are you all right?" I froze. For a split second, I wondered if he could somehow see everything I was hiding. But then he blinked, waiting for me to answer, unaware of the storm inside me. I smiled a small, practiced smile. Just tired. He nodded, but his eyes lingered a moment longer, like he didn't quite believe me. Then he looked down at his hands and quietly said, "I've been thinking a lot about us." My heart began beating faster. I didn't know where he was going with this. I didn't know if I was ready for whatever he wanted to say. He continued, "I shouldn't have left the way I did. I should have talked to you. I didn't want things to end that way." His words were kind, and for a moment I felt a warm ache, like a door inside me opening just a little. But then reality reminded me of the life growing inside me. A life he didn't know about. A truth that sat between us like a shadow. He reached out across the table slightly, not to touch me, but in a small gesture of sincerity. He said, "I want to make things right." I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. My hands felt cold. I whispered, "We don't have to talk about the past." He smiled softly. "But I want to, because you mattered to me. You still do." Those words hit me in a place I didn't expect. Part of me wanted to break down right there and tell him everything. Tell him how scared I had been. Tell him how lonely the last few weeks had felt. Tell him how many nights I had held my stomach wondering if I had ruined both of our lives. But another part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself, kept quiet. After a few minutes of silence, he stood up slowly and said, "I'll leave. I didn't want to force anything. I just wanted to see you." I walked him to the door, feeling the weight of unspoken truth pressing on me. Before leaving, he turned and said quietly, "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." I nodded, and then he was gone. The moment the door closed, I leaned against it and covered my face with my hands. My breathing came out shaky. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I wasn't crying because I missed him. I wasn't crying because he had come back. I was crying because the situation felt like a tightrope I was walking alone, and any move could send everything tumbling down. Over the next few days, I tried to go back to my routine, waking early, attending classes, pretending to laugh at my friends' jokes, eating small meals even when I didn't feel hungry, sleeping lightly with a hand on my stomach. But it became harder to hide small changes, the fatigue, the quiet pauses, the way I avoided anything that required too much movement. My mother would sometimes look at me with a soft frown and say, "You should rest more." I would smile and say, "I'm fine." But deep down, I could feel her worry slowly growing. One evening, while I was washing dishes, she stood beside me, drying them. She studied my face for a long moment and said, "You're quieter these days." I kept my eyes on the sink and replied, "Just stress from school." She nodded that her eyes lingered on me like she wanted to ask more, but she didn't, and I was grateful for that silence. Meanwhile, he kept trying to reach out. Short messages, simple questions. "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Can we talk again?" I didn't reply to most of them. I didn't want to open a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But the guilt grew heavier because he was trying, at least in the small ways he could, and I was keeping a truth from him that he deserved to know. Yet every time I imagined telling him, fear swallowed me whole. What if he said he wasn't ready? What if he asked why I hadn't told him earlier? What if he thought I was trying to trap him? What if he chose to leave again, this time for good? One afternoon, I was sitting in my room, staring at the slow movement of sunlight on the wall, when my phone buzzed again. His message said, "I don't want to disturb you. I just hope you're okay. I still care about you." I stared at the words for a long time. My throat tightened, my eyes felt warm, but I didn't respond. As the weeks passed, my body kept changing. Little signs, little reminders that time was moving forward, whether I was ready or not. Some mornings I stared at myself in the mirror, placing my palm on my stomach, feeling both frightened and strangely connected to the life inside me. I whispered things like, "I'm trying. Please hold on. I don't know how this will end." The nights were the hardest. The silence felt louder. My thoughts grew heavier. He knocked on my door a second time, a soft, hesitant knock. When I opened, he looked at me with a mixture of worry and hope. He said, "I haven't seen you in weeks. I just wanted to know how you were." I nodded and stepped aside. We sat in the same chairs as before. He asked, Did I do something wrong? I shook my head. No, it's not you. He leaned forward slightly. Then what is it? You look different, tired, sad. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled slightly. He gently said, "You can talk to me, you know." I wanted to. I truly did, but the words felt trapped behind fear. I whispered, "It's nothing you can help with." He frowned softly. "Let me try." And those 3 words broke something inside me, not in a painful way, but in a vulnerable way, because no one had said that to me in a long time. Not my family, not my friends. I looked away. I whispered, "It's complicated." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to tell me everything. Just don't shut me out." I felt tears gathering in my eyes, but I blinked them back. After a long pause, he said, "I want to be here, even if things are difficult." His sincerity scared me even more, because deep down, I knew that once he found out the truth, everything would change. After he left that evening, I sat on my bed holding my pillow to my chest, breathing slowly, trying to calm my trembling. The conflict inside me was growing. Each day felt heavier than the one before. Every moment felt like standing between 2 impossible choices, telling the truth and risking everything, or staying silent and walking deeper into loneliness. And life doesn't let anyone hide forever, because just when I thought I could keep my secret buried a little longer, something happened. Something small, something simple, but it broke the fragile balance I had been holding on to. It happened on a quiet morning, with sunlight spilling across my room. I had stood up too fast, too suddenly, and everything around me began to blur. My head felt light, my chest tightened, my vision flickered. The last thing I remembered was gripping the edge of my desk, whispering, "Not now, please." And then the world tilted. Just before everything went dark, I heard my mother's voice calling my name from the hallway. She sounded close. She sounded scared. And for the first time, I realized something with terrifying clarity. My secret was about to be exposed. When I opened my eyes, everything felt slow, like waking up underwater. The room was bright, almost too bright, and the ceiling above me looked unfamiliar. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. I blinked several times, trying to steady my breathing. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Thank God you're awake." My mother. She was sitting beside the bed, her hand wrapped around mine. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for a long time. She looked frightened, and seeing her like that made my heart sink. I whispered, "What happened?" "You fainted," she said softly. "You were unconscious for a few minutes. Your father and I carried you to the car. We brought you straight to the clinic." My chest tightened. I looked around and noticed the white walls, the soft humming of machines, the faint smell of antiseptic. A clinic. A small one, but still. My secret had never felt more fragile. My mother squeezed my hand. "You scared us," she whispered. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat felt dry. My breath shook. How long could I keep hiding it? How long until everything inside me came spilling out? A doctor entered just then, a calm, older woman with kind eyes. She checked my pulse, asked me a few questions, and then said gently, "I need to speak with you alone for a moment." My mother hesitated, but nodded. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. The silence felt heavy. The doctor sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me carefully. "Do you know why you fainted?" I lowered my gaze. I didn't answer. She spoke quietly. "You're not sick. You're not in danger. "But you are pregnant." There it was, the truth spoken out loud for the first time, not by me, but by someone else. My eyes filled with tears that I tried so hard to swallow. My hands trembled under the blanket. She continued, "You're a few months along. Your body is under stress. You need proper care. And you need support." Support. A word that felt both comforting and impossible. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "I won't tell your parents anything you don't want me to, but they care deeply about you, and sooner or later, they will notice." I nodded slowly, my throat tight with fear. After she left the room, I sat silently, waiting. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears. The door opened again. My mother stepped inside. Her eyes were searching, soft, worried, almost pleading. She approached the bed slowly. She asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but the tears slipping down my cheeks betrayed me. My mother sat down beside me again and held my hand. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just waited. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "The doctor told me." My heart dropped. I felt like the world around me collapsed into silence. I turned my face away, unable to look at her. I expected anger, disappointment, maybe even disgust. But instead, I felt her hand slowly stroke my hair. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Something inside me broke. Not from pain, but from the release of everything I had been holding in. I was scared, I whispered. My voice shook. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to be disappointed in me. I didn't know what to do." My mother wiped my tears with trembling fingers. Her own eyes were full of tears she was trying not to shed. "Oh, my child," she whispered. "You should never be afraid to tell me the truth. I'm your mother. I'm here for you, always." I broke down then. Quiet sobs, shaking breaths, hands covering my face. My mother held me close, her arms wrapped around me tightly. We didn't speak for a long time. We just sat there, with tears and quiet breaths filling the room. Finally, when I calmed, she whispered, "Does he know?" I froze. He, the one person I had kept in the shadows of this secret, the one who had been reaching out while I kept shutting him out. I shook my head slowly. No. My mother took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around mine. She said, "You have to tell him." "I can't," I whispered. "What if he leaves again? What if he blames me? What if he thinks I did this on purpose? I don't want him to feel trapped." My mother looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen since I was a little girl. She brushed my hair away from my face and said quietly, "You're not trapping anyone. This is life. This is real. And he deserves to know. Whatever he chooses after that is his choice. But you must tell him." Her words were heavy, but true. She kissed my forehead gently. "We'll handle this together. You're not alone." Those words made something warm spread inside me, a feeling I hadn't felt in months. After a few hours, we returned home. My father didn't say much. He was never a man of many words. But his quiet presence felt different, softer, concerned, a little shaken. He placed a cup of warm tea in front of me that evening and said quietly, "We'll figure this out." That was his way of saying he cared. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was enough. The next day, I sat in my room, holding my phone, staring at his number. The memory of him standing at my door, asking if I was okay, flashed through my mind. His worried eyes, his gentle questions, his soft patience. I realized he had been trying, and I had been running. I took a shaky breath and typed a message. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." Not even a minute passed before he sent back, "I'll come right now." My hands trembled. My heart pounded. When he arrived, he looked worried, more worried than before. He stepped inside, waiting for me to speak. I gestured for him to sit. He sat slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. I opened my mouth, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I stared at my hands, trying to steady my breath. Finally, I whispered, "I should have told you earlier." He leaned forward slightly. "It's okay. You can tell me now." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling my whole body tense, and then I said it. "I'm pregnant." Silence. A silence so deep that I could hear my own heartbeat. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, his eyes wide, not angry, not cold, just shocked. I swallowed hard. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel forced to stay with me. I didn't want you to be scared. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you. And when you pulled away, I thought maybe it was best if I handled it alone." My voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he whispered my name, softly, gently. I looked up. His eyes were full of emotion, confusion, fear, and something else, something like hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. His voice wasn't angry, it was pained. "Because I didn't want you to lose me." He exhaled slowly, running his hand through his hair. His breathing was shaky. This is big," he said softly. "I know." He looked at me again, really looked at me. He saw the fear, the exhaustion, the loneliness, and something in him softened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed slightly. After a long moment, he said, "I would never have left you alone in this." My heart pressed painfully against my ribs. "I thought you didn't want us anymore," I whispered. He shook his head slowly. "I needed time. I was overwhelmed, but I never stopped caring about you." He lifted his gaze, his eyes steady. "You should have told me." The words weren't harsh. They were full of disappointment, but also honesty. I nodded, my tears slipping down my cheeks. "I know. I was trying to protect everyone, but I ended up hurting myself instead." He reached out slowly, hesitating, then gently placed his hand over mine, holding them both gently. "You're not alone," he said softly. For the first time in a long time, I believed it. Everything wasn't perfect. Things were still uncertain. The road ahead was still blurry, but something had shifted. The truth was finally out, and though it hurt, though it shook everything around me, it also opened a door I had kept closed for too long. Some secrets break you, but some secrets, when spoken, begin to heal you. I stayed inside the house for a long time after that. The rain had stopped, but the quiet felt heavy. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and held it with both hands because they would not stop shaking. I felt so tired. Not in my body, but somewhere deeper. I sat down at the small table near the window. For years, that table held so many things. My late-night worries, my small moments of relief, my hopes, my letters, my silence. Tonight, it held only one thing: the weight of truth finally spoken. I touched my stomach gently, like I had done since the day I realized I was carrying a life inside my body. It felt warm. It felt real. It felt like the only steady thing in that moment. I whispered, "You're safe, I promise." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. Everything wasn't perfect. Things were still uncertain. The road ahead was still blurry, but something had shifted. The truth was finally out, and though it hurt, though it shook everything around me, it also opened a door I had kept closed for too long. Some secrets break you, but some secrets, when spoken, begin to heal you. I stayed inside the house for a long time after that. The rain had stopped, but the quiet felt heavy. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and held it with both hands because they would not stop shaking. I felt so tired. Not in my body, but somewhere deeper. I sat down at the small table near the window. For years, that table held so many things: my late-night worries, my small moments of relief, my hopes, my letters, my silence. Tonight, it held only one thing: the weight of truth finally spoken. I touched my stomach gently, like I had done since the day I realized I was carrying a life inside my body. It felt warm. It felt real. It felt like the only steady thing in that moment. I whispered, "You're safe, I promise." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The next morning, the world looked different. Nothing around me had changed. Not the street, not the small houses nearby, not the sky, but something inside me had shifted. I felt like I was standing in a space that had finally been cleaned after a long time of dust and darkness. I made myself a cup of tea and stood near the window. Cars passed slowly, birds sat on the electric wires, a soft cold air moved the curtains. It all felt normal. I had not felt normal in a long time. It buzzed again and again. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, from my sister, from my mother, from my father, from him. I did not open anything. Not yet. My heart was too quiet, too fragile. I wanted to keep it like that for a little bit longer. Around noon, I got dressed and stepped outside. I walked slowly to the small clinic 2 streets away. The same clinic where I first heard the heartbeat. The clinic where the nurse held my hand when I cried without saying a single word. When I arrived, she recognized me immediately. She smiled softly and said, "You're okay today?" I nodded, not because everything was okay, but because I was okay. And that was enough for now. We had a long appointment. She checked everything carefully. She explained everything with patience. She asked me many questions, but never pushed when I took time to answer. Before leaving, she touched my arm and said, "You're doing well, better than you think." I almost cried again. Not from sadness, but from kindness. Kindness had become such a rare thing in the past months. When I left the clinic, I walked for a long time without thinking about where I was going. The sky was bright, the air was cool. I felt like I was walking inside a new beginning, even if it was small and quiet. Eventually, I reached the park, a simple place with wooden benches and tall trees. I sat down and watched children run around. Some fell and stood back up. Some argued and made up 2 minutes later. Some laughed so loudly that it echoed across the grass. Life was happening everywhere. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I could step into life again too. I put my hand on my stomach and whispered, "You're going to have a peaceful life. I'll make sure of it." This time, I believed myself. That evening, I finally opened the messages from my family. My mother wrote, "We are shocked, but we want to talk. We love you. Please come home." My father wrote, "We should discuss everything calmly. Don't be alone." My sister wrote, "I'm angry that you didn't tell me, but I love you. I'm here." And then there was him. His messages were long, too long, filled with apologies, filled with questions, filled with fear, filled with promises. Promises that felt heavy, promises that sounded desperate, promises I didn't know how to hold anymore. I did not reply to him, not because I hated him, but because I needed space. I needed breath. I needed silence. I needed to think, not as someone who loved him, but as someone who was about to become a mother. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was dim, and the only sound was the small clock ticking on the wall. My heart felt calm for the first time in months. I whispered to myself, "You did not ruin your life. You protected it." It felt strange to hear those words, but the more I repeated them, the more they felt true. I slept early that night. It was the first peaceful sleep I had in a long time. I want to tell you about the small, ordinary days that followed. They were not filled with grand events or dramatic scenes. They were full of slow mornings, quiet appointments, and soft, steady care. My mother took on small tasks without making them a spectacle. She learned to cook new things that were gentle on my stomach. She left warm water bottles by my feet and made sure I had simple meals on the table. My father began to ask small, careful questions. He would ask how I slept, how the clinic appointment went, if I had taken my vitamins. It surprised me how his quiet care felt like an anchor during rough moments. My sister and I eventually started talking at night. She would come to my room after work and sit on the bed without saying much. Those visits were a kind of healing. They reminded me I was not alone, even when my fears tried to tell me otherwise. He came around slowly, like a tide trying to find its way back. At first, we met only in public places. Short walks, a coffee shop with soft lighting, a park bench where we could talk and then go our separate ways. We learned to speak without rushing. He listened more than he used to. I learned to say small truths without collapsing. That practice mattered. We had honest conversations about what had happened. He told me that he had been afraid of responsibility. He told me how unprepared he felt. He apologized in a way that was quiet and real. I told him why I had hidden the pregnancy. I told him about the nights I had tried to be brave alone, about the way I imagined everyone's disappointment. When I spoke, he did not interrupt. He let me finish my sentences. There were no dramatic reunions. There were no sudden declarations of forever. Instead, there were small agreements that he would come to one clinic visit, that he would help in small ways, that we would speak honestly from then on. We set boundaries. We made slow plans. We spoke about the future in small pieces rather than in sweeping promises. Some days were good. Some days were heavy with fear. That was part of the process, and it became something I expected. I learned to find peace in ordinary tasks. Folding laundry became a quiet meditation. Making tea felt like a ritual that brought steadiness. Walking slowly in the evening became the time I spoke to the child inside me. I started to write letters, not to anyone specific, not to change decisions. They were letters to the child, to myself, and sometimes to him. I wrote about small things, what I wanted the baby to know, what I wished for myself, what I hoped we could become. Those letters helped me name my feelings. They were small steps in learning how to be a mother even before the child arrived. The clinic appointments became milestones. Each time we heard the steady heartbeat, and something inside me relaxed like a held breath being released. Hearing that rhythmic sound changed fear into a cautious hope. We grew careful about our speech. We practiced saying thank you. We practiced asking for help. We practiced patience. My friends began to notice the change in me. Some were kind and steady. Some were surprised and had questions. A few distanced themselves, unsure how to be part of this new chapter. That hurt for a while, but it also taught me about the people who stayed. Those who remained were small lights, a friend bringing soup, a message checking in, a neighbor handing over a bag of groceries. My work rhythm changed too. I let myself slow down. I took fewer shifts and asked for understanding from teachers. People were more kind than I expected. Financial worries came and stayed. They are honest and practical concerns that no one can ignore. We made budgets in a quiet, straightforward way. We cut things that were not necessary. We held on to what mattered. He found ways to help that did not demand sudden transformation. He fixed a leaky tap. He learned to sew a button back on. He sat through evening talks and stayed present. Small acts meant a lot. My mother taught me how to make a warm soup that smelled like comfort. She told me stories of difficult times when she was young. Her stories did not remove my fear, but they made me feel like hardship did not have to define me. As my belly grew, so did my courage. The world around me felt more present. Colors were a bit brighter. Sounds had a new softness. People's eyes on the street sometimes lingered. I felt them and then turned away. At first, that felt like shame, but then I learned to carry myself with quiet dignity. The baby's kicks became messages. Each movement was an answer to a silent worry. I would place my hand and close my eyes and feel a little presence that was already a teacher of patience. I remember the first time I imagined holding the child. It was early one morning, sunlight leaking through the curtains. I pictured a small face, sleeping trustfully. I felt a rush of protectiveness so sharp it made me cry. We prepared the room slowly. A small corner became soft with a blanket, a tiny lamp, some books. We did not buy many things. We chose a few things with care. People gave gifts, some practical, some small tokens of love. Each one was an apology from the world for the fear I had carried alone. There were tougher days when doubts returned, when health worries came, or when money looked thin. Those days, we spoke and planned and held each other steady. Sometimes I would wake up in the night and wonder if I had done the right thing by keeping some things secret. The answer was never simple, but I learned to be honest about regrets without letting them poison my present. I learned to forgive myself slowly. Forgiveness was not a single act, more like a series of small choices. Each morning, I chose to start again. Each time, I gave a little more space to my own mistakes. We also had to speak to older family members about plans and expectations. Some conversations were difficult. Old beliefs and new realities sometimes clashed, but over time, many softened. My father surprised me by joining an appointment once. He waited in the corridor, silently reading an old magazine. When we left, he took my hand and said nothing dramatic, only, "You're brave." Those words mattered more than I had imagined. He, my partner, began to show a steady presence that was not about grand statements, but about consistency. Some mornings I would find a small breakfast on the table. Some evenings he would fold laundry. Some nights he would read a page from a book and then close the door gently so I could rest. I appreciated the small things. They made a shape of trust where words sometimes failed. Then came the last trimester with its own slow rhythm. Doctors' visits increased. So did the quiet excitement. We read a few parenting books in small pieces, laughing at how naive we were in places and relieved in others. We practiced breathing. We practiced staying calm. We practiced caring. The night I went into labor, everything was ordinary. We had a light dinner, and then the first sign, a small tightening. It was gentle at first, then steady. My mother and sister came with us to the hospital, quiet and strong. He drove slowly, speaking little, his hands steady on the wheel. I felt calm in a way I had not expected. Labor was long and honest work. It was not the dramatic scene I had imagined in movies. There were moments of doubt and pain, and there were moments of quiet courage. When the baby came, the room stood still for a moment that felt like forever. A small cry, then another. I remember holding the tiny, slippery body and feeling my heart break open in the kindest way. They placed the baby on my chest, and time changed forever. The sound of that first breath was a promise and a relief. I cried quietly, with a sound that came from the place where fear once lived. He stood near, a hand on my shoulder, tears in his eyes. My mother and sister watched with soft smiles. Nurses moved with careful calm. We named the child with a name that felt like sunlight. It was simple, steady, and full of hope. Those first days at home were soft and slow. We learned how to feed, how to soothe, how to read small cues. Sleep was broken, but full of small miracles. A peaceful face in blue light, tiny fingers around a thumb. People came with warm food and gentle words. Neighbors stopped by with a small basket. Friends sent messages that made my heart light. The child grew quickly, as children do. Months passed and brought laughter and some worry, but mostly a deepening of love that surprised me with its courage. I learned to carry the child and the life as one thing that required care. Not perfect, not always easy, but honest and real. There came a morning when I sat with the baby in my lap and thought about the long road that had brought me here. I thought about the test, the secret, the fainting, the clinic room, the conversation, the small acts of kindness. I thought about how many times I had told myself a story of shame that was not mine to carry.
In that quiet, my heart filled with gratitude, not because everything was easy, but because we had chosen truth, because we had chosen care. I do not pretend the world became simple. We still have bills. We still have worries. There are no tidy endings to the real parts of life. But I do know this. Choosing to speak the truth, finally, made all the difference. My child learned my voice first. My child learned the rhythm of our small house, the sounds of our laughter, the smell of our soup. My child learned warmth before anything else. And I learned something else too. I learned that courage is often quiet. It is not the same thing as boldness. It is the small, steady decision to keep going. I learned that forgiveness can grow slowly, like green shoots after a long winter. It does not erase mistakes. It holds them with gentleness.
I learned that people can surprise you with mercy. Sometimes the ones you expect to break you give you a steady hand instead. I learned that the future does not arrive all at once. It is built by a million small choices, by morning cups of tea, by slow apologies, by hands held during long nights. If I could speak to my younger self, the one who held that test in a trembling hand, I would place a soft palm over hers and say, "It will be hard. It will be messy. You will feel afraid, but you will be held. You will find people who love you in ways you cannot imagine now. Choose the truth, choose small kindness, choose to breathe." For anyone listening to this story, please know this. Your mistakes do not define your worth. Your fears do not have to be secrets forever. There is strength in asking for help. There is grace in letting others love you through the hard parts. I do not know everything the future holds. I do not have a map, but I have learned to walk forward slowly, with care. The child in my arms will teach me more than I can ever teach them. And I will teach them the small truths I wish I had known, that they are loved, that silence should not be heavy, and that courage is often a quiet voice that says, "I will try again tomorrow." In the end, I kept the small life inside me, and I found, through truth and slow healing, that keeping it did not take away my dignity. If anything, it returned it. If this story reaches anyone who is frightened or hiding, I will say with all the calm I have left to give, you are not alone. You do not have to carry everything by yourself. There is room for truth, for forgiveness, and for gentle beginnings. Choose the small light. Hold it. Walk forward. And let kindness find you. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet in a way that felt gentle on my heart. I went to my checkups, I ate better, I slept with fewer fears than before, I walked more, I breathed more, and slowly the heaviness inside me began to melt away. I didn't make any sudden decisions. I didn't rush to fix things. I didn't force myself to forgive. I didn't pressure myself to forget. I just allowed myself to be. And that was something I had not done in years. My family visited me first. They knocked softly on my door, and for a moment I froze. Then I opened it. My mother stepped inside slowly, as if afraid to scare me. My father stood behind her, holding a small bag of fruits, because he never arrived anywhere empty-handed. My sister walked in last, tears already in her eyes, even though she tried to hide them with a smile. No one raised their voice. No one asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" No one accused. No one judged. We sat together in the living room. Silence filled the space at first, but it wasn't the harsh kind. It was the soft kind, the kind that lets wounds breathe. Finally, my mother whispered, "We love you." That never changed. My sister came closer and held my hand. "You don't have to do everything alone," she said. Her voice broke on the last word, but her grip was steady. My father, who rarely showed emotion, touched my shoulder gently. He said, "We will walk with you through this." I felt something warm spread through my chest. Not relief exactly, not joy exactly, something gentler, something like being held after standing in the cold for too long. He contacted me again a few days later, not with long messages this time, just a simple line. "Whenever you're ready to talk, I'm here." There was no pressure in his words, no demands, no panic, just space. And that was the first message from him that didn't make my heart feel heavy. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't ready. But for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of the idea of talking to him someday. Not now, not soon, but someday, when my heart felt steady enough to face everything with calm instead of fear. I didn't know what would happen between us. I didn't know if we would rebuild anything. I didn't know if trust could return. But I knew this. I would make every decision as a mother first, not as someone who was hurt, not as someone who loved too deeply, not as someone who hid too much, as a mother. That thought made everything look clearer. One evening, I lit a small lamp near my window and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The room was quiet. My heart felt full. I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered, "We are going to live gently. No more hiding, no more silence." The baby kicked lightly, almost as if responding. A soft smile formed on my face. For months I had lived in fear. For months I had carried this life alone. For months I had hidden pieces of myself. But now I was finally stepping into light again. Not bright, not loud, just soft light. The kind that feels like morning after a long night. I didn't know exactly how my story would unfold after this. Life rarely gives full maps. It gives moments, choices, small steps. But I knew this much. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I wasn't weak. I was simply someone who took too long to choose herself. And now I had chosen.
My child would grow up knowing love, not fear, knowing truth, not silence, knowing warmth, not confusion, knowing strength, not shame. And maybe, just maybe, that would fix all the cracks inside me, too. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, my breath felt free. The days after bringing the baby home were slow, gentle, and completely different from anything I had ever lived before. I moved through the house with a new awareness, as if every corner had changed its shape to fit this new life. Sometimes I stood by the crib just to watch the tiny chest rise and fall. It amazed me how such a small movement could quiet the loudest worries inside me. At times, I would forget that the world outside was still complicated. Inside my little home, life was soft. The baby's small sounds filled the rooms, little sighs, tiny hiccups, quiet stretches. Each sound felt like a reminder that I had chosen something real, something worth every difficult moment. My mother came almost every morning. She walked in with the gentle confidence of someone who had raised children before.
She would make tea, fold tiny clothes, and hum old songs while holding the baby close to her chest. Her presence alone made the house feel less fragile. My father came in the evenings after work. He sat on the couch, not talking much, but watching the baby with eyes that softened each time the child moved. Sometimes he would ask, "Do you need anything?" And even if I didn't, the question itself felt like a shelter. My sister became my late-night companion. She held the baby when my arms were tired. She watched videos on how to soothe crying infants and insisted on trying every technique she found. Her laughter made difficult nights feel lighter. And he became part of the picture in small, steady ways. He started visiting once or twice a week at first. He would sit quietly on the edge of the couch, watching the baby as if trying to understand this new world he was entering. His presence felt different now, slower, softer, more intentional. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't pretending to know everything. He was simply trying. There were moments when he held the baby with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a new sense of responsibility. In those moments, I saw a version of him I had never seen before, a version that made me believe people truly can grow when life asks them to. We still didn't talk about the future in big, dramatic ways. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We learned to speak in real terms, about diaper changes, doctor visits, and how quickly the baby was learning to focus their eyes. Little by little, those conversations stitched us together again, not as we were before, but as two people learning a new rhythm. One afternoon, he came with a small box. He didn't make a big speech, he simply placed it on the table and said, "I got something for the baby. I hope it's okay." Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a star. Nothing expensive, nothing overly shiny, just a small, thoughtful piece of hope. I ran my thumb over the little charm and felt a calm warmth spread through me. "Thank you," I whispered, and I meant it. Moments like that were not about items. They were about effort, and effort was what mattered now. There were harder days, too. Days when the baby cried for hours. Days when I felt tired down to my bones. Days when I questioned if I was doing anything right. Breastfeeding was difficult. Sometimes I sat on the bed, tears spilling down my face, wondering if I was failing. Those were the moments when my mother sat beside me and placed a calm hand on my back. She would say, "No mother learns in a day. You're doing well." And somehow her voice held me together. There were doctor visits that made me nervous. I feared every small cough, every tiny fever, every restless night. But each visit brought reassurance, and each reassurance taught me to trust myself a little more. There were nights when I woke up just to watch the baby sleep, not because they needed me, but because I needed the reminder that they were real, safe, and growing. The soft glow of the night lamp, the tiny breaths, the curled fingers, these things filled the room with a sense of peace I had never known before. As the weeks passed, I realized something important. Life didn't become easier. I became stronger. My choices hadn't magically erased fear or uncertainty. They had simply taught me that I could keep moving, even with fear beside me. I learned to celebrate small victories. The first smile, the first sounds that almost felt like giggles, the first time the baby wrapped their hand around my finger and held it tightly. These moments made me feel like my world was expanding instead of shrinking. I became taking short walks with the stroller,
At first, it felt strange to be outside again, like I was stepping into a world I'd been away from for a long time. People smiled at the baby, some even asked how old they were. Simple interactions, but they helped me feel connected again. One day, an older woman stopped me on the sidewalk. She looked at the baby, then at me, and said gently, "You're doing good, dear. I can see it in the way your child looks at you." She walked away before I could thank her, but her words stayed with me. Sometimes strangers see things you're too tired to notice. He became more confident with the baby as time passed. He learned how to hold them properly. He learned how to change diapers without making a mess. He learned the difference between the baby's hungry cry and their sleepy cry.
He laughed one evening, saying, "I never thought I'd become an expert in tiny socks." And I laughed too, something I hadn't done so freely in a long time. We still had our boundaries. We still lived separately. But we were connected by this tiny life, and both of us were learning to show up. There was one moment I'll never forget. The baby was lying on a small blanket in the living room. He sat beside them, watching them kick and wave their arms. After a while, he leaned closer and whispered, "I'll always be here." He didn't say it to impress me. He said it to the baby. Just a quiet promise from a father to a newborn. Hearing those words softened something deep inside me that I didn't know was still tight. My confidence as a mother grew as weeks turned into months. Not because I suddenly mastered everything, but because I learned to be gentle with myself. I learned to rest. I learned to ask for help. I learned that I didn't need to carry every fear alone. I learned that motherhood wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. Every morning began with a new lesson. Every night ended with a new memory. One night, while rocking the baby to sleep, I realized something very quietly. I wasn't the same person who had hidden her pregnancy in fear. I wasn't the same person who cried alone in a clinic room. I wasn't the same person who felt unworthy of being supported. I had become someone braver, someone softer, someone stronger, someone steadier. And it wasn't because everything had worked out perfectly. It was because I had decided to move forward, even when I didn't know what waited ahead. There were moments when I looked at the baby and wondered who they would become. Would they be gentle? Would they be curious? Would they laugh easily? Would they love stories or music or quiet mornings? Every time I imagined their future, I felt a warmth that spread through all the hurt places inside me. I realized that this journey, messy, unexpected, emotional, had given me something precious, a chance to rewrite my life with honesty and hope. And slowly, without rushing, without forcing anything, the house that once felt heavy with secrets now felt full of new beginnings. Final message: who listen this story. Life doesn't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes it breaks quietly, inside you, while you smile on the outside. Sometimes you hide things not because you are ashamed, but because you are scared of losing everything at once. Sometimes you walk alone because you think no one will understand. But silence is heavy. Secrets are lonely. Fear grows when it has no light. And one day, something inside you will whisper, "Enough. Choose yourself." When you finally listen, the world doesn't become perfect, but it becomes softer. And sometimes, softness is all you need to begin again. The ending that I conquered myself. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.